What are we talking about today?
We're talking about the man, the myth, the legend. I don't know if you're allowed to say legend with three movies, but he's really good and we really like him. Robert Eggers. We're going to be talking about The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and really this is all leading up to Nosferatu, which comes out next week on Christmas Day. So we figured this would be a good time to talk about his works up till now. And it's kind of wild. It hasn't even been 10 years that he's been like really a name brand director, if you can consider after The Witch he was. But yeah, that came out in 2015. The Lighthouse was 2019. So 4 year gap. And then 3 years later was The Northman. And then 2 years after that, we're getting Nosferatu. So it seems like there's a little bit of an acceleration there, which is really exciting. He's definitely one of my favorite working directors right now. So, John, I'll let you give a little bit of a background of your experience with Eggers.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never seen any of his movies until earlier this year when you told me about him. So it's thanks to you that I even know
Oh,
of him.
really? Was that The Witch?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a horror guy, So like until this year, I've probably seen the most horror I've ever seen in this year. So
Oh,
that's one that
nice.
yeah, I just assumed. I was like, this is too scary. I don't want to see this. And then the Lighthouse I had heard about, and I heard it was weird, and I just never saw it. But I think, like, to your point, I mean, he's not a legend yet, but he's definitely one of our like generation's budding stars. I mean, he's 41, but he's a younger director, right?
Mhm.
And in the full picture, and yeah, I'm
And
pretty
in
excited.
Hollywood, that would make him one of the youngest, leading actors at this
I
point.
know, right now, yeah, definitely. But yeah, before we get into it, what have you seen recently?
Yeah, I mean, I've been honestly so busy with the holidays and prepping for this and the rest of life, but I've only watched two movies recently outside of these. So I watched Carry On, or Carry On, I should say. It's a Netflix movie about a TSA agent battling a terrorist, which is Jason Bateman, which is really, I mean, just some primo Netflix slop. I really did not care for it that much.
Okay.
I mean, Jason Bateman wasn't bad. It wasn't great casting. I have a really hard time buying Jason Bateman as a terrorist. But the other one that I watched that I actually really liked was Yacht Rock, which was a documentary that HBO distributed recently. It was actually produced by The Ringer,
Mm.
but it basically covers the like easy listening movement of the late 70s, early 80s in Southern California. So it's like Steely Dan, Michael McDonald, Christopher Cross. And it was excellent. I loved it. I love a music doc, especially like I like soft rock, so I was familiar with some of these bands and like their greatest hits, but
Mm.
um I love a music doc that you can kind of just, I mean, we were locked in watching it, but you could also just kind of have that in the background and just appreciate like the history you're seeing. So it was really good. Highly recommend.
Okay, yeah, I heard about that. I haven't not seen that many music documentaries. I mean, I want to see some of the big ones like Last Waltz and that
Hmm.
Beatles one. But yeah, I feel like I've definitely my expertise on documentaries is not quite there. And the other one that you mentioned, yeah, everyone keeps logging that. I keep seeing a lot of people watching that. I always wonder how that happens. Like all of a sudden, like everybody's watching some Netflix movie I've never heard of.
It's just
But
the algorithm is that
mm,
powerful. I mean, it's the town square bulletin board. Whenever Netflix puts something up, everyone has it. So if they put something on like trending this week, everyone's going to watch it.
yeah, it's funny. Like everyone's just giving it like 2 stars. I'm like, why are people watching?
I know. Why is everyone watching this shit?
Yeah,
But we are.
yeah. All right, let's talk about The Witch.
Okay.
And if you're listening out there and you haven't seen The Witch, this is the pitch I give you. I think it's one of the best horror movies in the last 10 years. Now, like I said before, I'm not as well versed in the horror genre, but I've seen the big stuff. I've seen every single Friday the 13th movie. I've done a bit of my research on
You
horror.
know your 80s horror pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, I
You're
know, I
just
know.
40 years behind the curve is all.
Yeah, I know the classics. I'm not well versed in what's recent, so maybe it's not even fair to say it's the best in the last 10 years. But I am gonna say that anyways. And it's Anya Taylor Joy in her feature film debut, so that's awesome. And we'll talk about it later, but she's great in it. And it's also the feature film debut of the director we're talking about today, which is Robert Eggers. And like we mentioned earlier, he's probably the most promising, or one of the most promising younger directors. And yeah, I'll just go kind of right into the impact on me because I already mentioned it. So you introduced me to Eggers. You introduced me to The Witch. I watched it. I liked it a lot. I think it's part of the reason we started this podcast is how much we talked about it after. I rewatched it recently with my girlfriend. She liked it. I liked it just as much that second time. And you know, and I also watched the Lighthouse and the Northman again. Enjoyed them too. And you know, it's like Eggers is someone who our generation is pretty well familiar with. It's like every time I go in and look at the movie after I watch it, you know, everyone's seen it already. Everyone's got an opinion, but he's got mixed responses on some of them. You know, some of the ones that I like, some of my friends who I trust their opinions don't like, and then vice versa. And I think that's kind of interesting. There's not one of his 3 movies that everyone agrees is like, this is top tier, this is the best. Like it's pretty mixed across the board. So how about you? How do you feel about Eggers?
I mean, I love him. He's easily one of the directors I am most excited about right now. And I would say he's certainly like the most distinct of the current directors that I'm excited about. Like he just has such a unique, I don't even want, when I say style, I think a lot of times you could think of certain like cinematography tropes or like styles that like a Scorsese could have with like these panning shots and things like that. You know, in some ways Eggers is like less subtle than that, even because it's so much more about like what is the topic at hand and how are we talking about it. But still, I really don't know of any other director, certainly on the scale of what Eggers is doing, that's making this style of film. And it's really exciting to just see someone that's clearly just a huge history dork, or like enthusiast, that like this is what he wants to do and he's not really interested in compromising on that. So I love what he's doing. I think The Witch was an incredible opening act. I think technically he might have had a short feature or short film prior to that. I'm choosing to not count it. I'm just counting.
Yeah, I think it's like a Hansel and Gretel one or something. He has a
Yeah,
couple,
something like that. But no, I mean, I think The Witch, I should start by saying, I don't know if you remember, but it had an incredible trailer, like really, really scary trailer at the time. And I was similar when I saw that. I was like, no, I'm not going to watch this. I'm not in my horror bag yet. But a couple years later, I was like, I've always wanted to watch this. And so I watched it for Halloween probably 5 years ago or so. And definitely loved it off the bat, was really blown away. I think Anya Taylor-Joy had already started becoming a bigger name at that point. Maybe she wasn't huge by the time I saw it, but she was like more than just the witch girl, because she's quite young in that movie. I think she's probably only 15 or 16 maybe. But I think it's really excellent. I honestly, like, we talked about this last week with Interstellar and Christopher Nolan making the jump from I can't remember if it was Memento to Batman Begins or whatever it was, but basically just the topic of how impressive it is for someone to just appear on the scene and just have that skill set already, or jumping between skill set of scale. And this, to me, I was like, this is just so incredible. Like this, there's so much nuance. Like the way it's shot even is incredible. They had such a shoestring budget. And it's definitely an instance of like doing a lot with a little, like an artist having the skill, but also the forethought to recognize like, we just don't have the budget to do all these things in post. We don't have the budget to teach these people certain skills and dialects. So we're going to just hire people that already have those sorts of things and are interested in this sort of project. And so I don't want to ramble on here. I want to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on it. But right from the get-go, I found it a pretty inspiring film. And also, I just want to say one last note. For as much as it was marketed as horror, and that's certainly part of it, like it's also very much a family drama. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces that hooked me on it, was there's so much, you feel so much tension between these people, but also it's because there's so much love and chemistry there. You know, like you really see them as a family. Like these people depend on each other. And I don't think that a lot of horror succeeds at that, even if it makes the attempt. So I think that's a huge part of why it's been so sticky and what makes it such a great film.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a huge relationship to it. I didn't see the trailer. I just knew of it as that movie that has witch spelled with 2 V's and it's scary. Or two, yeah, 2 V's. You know, I just looked up while you're talking. Anya Taylor-Joy was 18 in it.
Okay.
I did not know that. I thought the same thing. I thought she was like 15 in it. She looks so young. That's crazy. But yeah, that kind of makes more sense. Like she's so good in it. And I guess that makes more sense. She had a little bit more experience. This was just her first feature film debut. Let me give you the summary, and then we can get into the movie. So, Evil takes many forms. In 1630, a farmer relocates his family to a remote plot of land on the edge of the forest where strange, unsettling things happen. With suspicion and paranoia mounting, each family member's faith, loyalty, and love are tested in shocking ways. And yeah, that last key line is, I think, really what jumps out to me, is like really looking at the impact on each family member as the course of the movie, as the movie goes on.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about that later. So it has a 3.8 average rating on Letterboxd. It's been viewed by 1.42 million people, or logged by 1.42. Had a $4 million budget and a $40 million box office, which is amazing. And
3.8 is a travesty, by the way.
3.8, I don't understand, man. And I'll mention this now, the Lighthouse has a 4. I don't get that. I don't understand how that's his highest average movie. I think the Northman also is like 3.8. So that doesn't make sense to me.
So odd.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about Eggers, and then you can fill in some of the gaps. So, his films are noted for the folklore and the mythological elements, and as well as, and you mentioned this earlier, his efforts to ensure historical authenticity, which I think definitely rings true. And we can talk about if that helps or hurts some of these films. Trying to stick, similar to our conversation on Interstellar, trying to make it perfectly scientifically accurate. Is that helping the story or holding it back a bit? So he was inspired by his childhood in New England, where he grew up. He frequently visited the Plymouth plantation in Massachusetts, and that's kind of what inspired him to write this first feature. He actually began his career as a designer, and he's a director of theater productions in New York, and then transitioned to working in film. Anything else on Eggers you want to talk about? Just like kind of fact stuff. I think we'll have more to talk about later on him.
I don't have too much to add. I will just add, I know that he also did a fair amount of stage acting himself prior to this. And also, this kind of just goes hand in hand with the doing stage production and working on the actual build side of things. It makes sense why he would have an interest in the sort of movies he's put out, like particularly his first two with The Witch and The Lighthouse. Because they're really, so much of those stories could have been set on stage, right? Like The Witch is a family drama, really confined to the farm for the most part. Mm-hmm. Certainly The Lighthouse is even smaller than that. Like I can imagine in my mind immediately what that would look like on stage to some degree. The Northman is definitely the biggest leap away from, I think, again, small sample size, but what we've come to know of Eggers. And I'm interested to see how Nosferatu will fit into that range of, small to large scale. But yeah, that was all I wanted to add, was just a little bit more of his background with the theater.
Yeah, no, I actually did not know that. So when you talk about the production for this film, I just have a couple of things here. So they went to Canada to film this because of the tax incentives, and on a $4 million budget, makes sense. So they found this location that was kind of off the map. So they originally looked at some of the typical locations that whoever the scouting person was offering, and nothing really fit what his vision was. So they found this place in Ontario that was pretty remote and isolated. He actually made a joke that it makes his hometown look like a metropolis, like the nearest town to this one was just nothing. So, and they shot it with only natural light, and the indoor scenes were shot only with candle light. The other time I saw, and this is one I know we want to talk about at some point, is Barry Lyndon. They did that too, and Barry Lyndon is it's like a masterful display of doing this, shooting with candlelight. But I thought this was pretty good too, pretty good for a first movie, cinematography side,
Yeah, I know he went digital to be able to capture those darkly lit interior scenes, which I think, and I honestly, there was a great breakdown of The Witch that I sent, I know, back to you when you watched it the first time around. But they talk about Barry Lyndon, I believe, in particular, because I think Kubrick might have used NASA lenses that were there was 10 of them made so that he could shoot those interiors with just candle lighting, and obviously that wasn't available to a first time, or essentially a first-time filmmaker like Eggers.
Yeah, makes sense. And then talking about the name, so I was looking at this because it's the way the film is stylized with the two V's instead of the W. He got that from a pamphlet on witchcraft, which he found from this Jacobean era, 1600s, witch hunt. So everything he does is very purposeful. That's not just a cool little thing. That was something that had a meaning to him. Anything else on like production that you want to talk about before we talk some about the actors?
No, I'm down to dive into the actors.
Yeah, so the actors are interesting in this one. Ralph Ineson. So he's had small roles on a lot of stuff. He's a like kind of a well known English character actor with actually really well known just for his accent. His accent being so strong. He plays the father. So he was in like Harry Potter and like a couple other like random things. But
He's in Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
he's in the Northman as well.
Yep. Yeah, actually, did you? I didn't recognize him the first time, but I did on the second time. He's the boat captain, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. They got him. He looks totally different. I did not pick up on that the first time. And then Kate Dickie, she was in Prometheus. Actually, did you see that? She plays the mom.
Yeah, and actually, she's in Game of Thrones as well. So a couple pickups from there. Yeah, she
and the Northman.
Who is she in the Northman?
She plays like the head mother of like the servants.
She's like the head servant. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, Kate Dickie's fantastic too. I really like Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickie. Both like clearly like stage background theater actors, which again, it does really seem like that is just a fantastic way to like have your background in acting. Like it provides such a different way of like inflection, and like just everything they say is so like you really do want to listen to it in a way that I feel like a lot of other, Netflix content aside, like you just don't see that level of acting. So anyway, anytime I see them in something, I really love it.
Yeah, definitely. The twins, I mean, we can skip Anya Taylor-Joy. I think everybody knows her, her filmography at this point. But the twins have been in nothing since, and I thought they were really good. I mean, I guess with child actors, you don't know, but like, yeah. I didn't think they were really good, but I thought they were like they did their role well. They've been in nothing since, and then Caleb has been in nothing since. And I thought he's so good.
I thought he was fantastic.
I know,
especially like because the twins kind of get a pass. They're so young that even if they're doing something that seems weird or normally be like that's bad acting, it's like they're children. Yeah. So you're like, I don't know, kids just do weird shit, and by the end you're like they're possessed. The character of Caleb's really good. I find him really believable, and like he's trying to do right by his family, but he's like also terrified. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in other movies, but like just tiny roles. Like one was uncredited, and like he's been in like 4 other things. And I thought there'd be more from him. I don't know. Maybe it's still coming. So if we want to get into the like actually talking about the movie, I'll kick us off with one thing, then I'll turn it over to you. I mean, I think what's really awesome about this movie, like if I want to summarize it in a line, is like it's scary with one real jump. It's got one jump, which is like when the witch is in the barn with them and she turns around and like it's coming, but it's still pretty scary when she jumps around like that. But it's scary because of the ambiance, the isolation, like not just like the isolation of the family in the woods, but slowly Anya Taylor-Joy's character being kind of isolated and pitted against everybody, and that's what makes this a scary movie to me. And I don't mind that there's no jump scares or real scary like Jason chasing them around. You got the devil and you got some witches, but yeah, I think that's really cool. I think they pulled it off really well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I sound like a broken record here, I'm sure, but because I say this every week, but I think one of the strengths of the movie is just the opening sequence is so effective. The balancing act that Eggers does of what is he choosing to omit and what is he choosing to explain does such a good job of telling us who these characters are without us getting bored, without there having to be a whole sequence in town that feels like it's just dragging before we get to what the story's really about. Like his choice to just have them really quickly have this trial in front of the town hall, in front of the mayor or the governor, and being sent out to exile. It says everything already. It's like, okay, they've been exiled from their Puritan colony. They left Europe to come to the New World for this colony, and they've been exiled by those people. So we know who they are in terms of their faith. They're extremely pious, potentially to a fault. Mm-hmm. And then just the image of going into this meadow where they build their house and whatnot. It's like, okay, like we're here. We're immediately here. And I think that whole sequence until you get to where they start living and where the baby gets stolen from. Is it Jonah? Is that the baby?
Yeah, I think it's like Jonas or something.
Jonas, yeah.
Is it? Yeah, something like that.
Anywho, he gets taken. I think the time to that occurring is about 5-6 minutes, maybe. So I just think he does a fantastic job here, on a script side of things, just keeping the viewer informed and you understand what's happening without requiring handholding and without stalling all of the narrative itself. So I love that piece of it. The performances are obviously excellent, like we just talked about. And I do want to talk about the dialect too.
Mhm.
This will come up in all three of the movies we're talking about today, but I actually really enjoyed the writing on this one. I didn't feel like it was so estranged from our dialect today that I couldn't understand it. Actually, kind of funnily enough, I think the Lighthouse was actually much more challenging to understand, which maybe that's in part because even those people are isolated in this moment. They've lived in a society more so than Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson in that movie. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I do actually really love that they chose to stick to the dialect of that time. I think it just adds another layer of immersion into it, along with the costuming and the shooting and all those things.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's cool also how like the dialect's different between the parents and the kids, right? Like as like there's new lingo, for the kids. Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
as they're like the way that they are forming sentences is not as like old timey, And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's good. I don't know if that's a specific choice that they made, but it works that like that they're not all talking like the dad.
Oh, I totally think that is that was a choice. I mean, even and to bring it up again, like in The Lighthouse, Willem Dafoe has a decidedly different accent
Yeah.
than Robert Pattinson. So I think this is something that Eggers and his team think about quite heavily.
Yeah, definitely. What other stuff did you like about it? I got a list too, but what else you got?
Yeah, so just to talk about a couple specific scenes and sequences, the scene of the baby getting stolen and then being made into a flying ointment. Did you look up in any of the history around this?
I did, yeah, I did. But go ahead, Ed, because that's about as far as I got with it. I was like, got it, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was a real thing, and it's pretty fascinating. There's like pamphlets of what they used to think witch hunting looked like back in the old country of Europe. And it's really something that people were convinced of at various points in history in Europe, for long periods of time. And one of the practices that they believed that witches partook in was something called a flying ointment, where they would basically sacrifice a baby, use either its blood or grind it. I mean, the sequence in The Witch is pretty brutal, and it's not even necessarily clear, I think, on a first watch. Like it's so horrendous you almost don't understand what she's doing. But she is, sacrificing the child, rubbing it all over her body. I mean, it's really horrifying. And then it is almost comical. You brought it up earlier, John, but you kind of have this horrifying moment to start. And it's really only for a second. There's no jump scare to it. It's just like disturbing. The rest of the movie is all about the ambiance and the buildup. And there is that jump scare with the witch in the room with them. And, you do see William get gored by
Mhm.
Black Phillip. But really, it's just those kind of peaks in those two moments. But anyway, I think they're done so excellently. And it sets the tone and like without overshadowing the rest of the sequences throughout it. I also really love, going back to Ralph Ineson, his performance as the father, and his relationship with Catherine, or Kate Dickie as Catherine. I find it so believable, like the fear that they have. I do believe that they love each other, but it's also maybe a different relationship or dynamic than what we see in a marriage today. But like, there's authentic love there and there's trust there. So I think all of their little sequences together are really believable and just push the story forward of why are we afraid? Why do we care? Why do we stay?
Yeah. Um, you think and this is, I guess, something that I'm coming across on all three movies where like there's certain things where I'm like, does this is obviously a reference to something, but is it like, does it mean anything for the story? Like, is he supposed to be Jesus? Like, he looks like Jesus. He's kind of dressed like Jesus. There's a couple of shots where it looks very much like some painting you'd see of like Jesus, But then I don't know how that ties to the story. Did you get that?
Yeah, especially at the end when he's wearing that like the white roby shawl sort of thing going on. I hadn't really thought about it a ton, other than maybe noticing it looked like an odd thing for him to be wearing. My like initial thought on that is I mean, ultimately his sin is his pride, but his pride originates from a deep belief in Jesus and Christianity. So as much as he's a flawed character, I don't find it like, it's not like he has some divine comeuppance that should be coming his way. But if you look at the story of it, it really is about the devil winning, right? Like that's what happens at the end. God is not there to protect them from Black Phillip.
Mhm.
And so I think that my thought, at least, of why he's wearing that robe and very much does look kind of Jesus like is almost just an additional like laugh for the sake of Satan, basically, of like, it's just an additional perversion of him looking like Jesus before he is killed and destroyed by this pile of his own, you know, failed plans, essentially. Like, I think when the wood tumbles down on him, that's essentially supposed to just be a dramatic irony. Like we're laughing at him as he tries so hard to control the one thing he can control, which is chopping wood. And ultimately just how pointless and futile it is for him to do that because it brings no salvation to him. And
Yeah.
similarly, it's like Jesus did not bring salvation to this family. So it's all just one giant joke, essentially, on these people for believing in Jesus. Is at least that's my kind of reading of it and how Black Phillip is imposing his will on them.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting take on it. Yeah, one thing I know for sure, or one thing I think, is that like their way of living, the Puritan way of living, they're not saying that that is good, and that like, oh, they, she should have done her prayers and listened and whatever, and like everything would have been fine. So like the repressive like nature of like how they're living, and like in that society is not like the right way, but like the liberated life that the devil is offering is also not the way, you know. So it's showing you two contrasting like extremes, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. So I don't know if he's supposed to be like this Jesus figure because his way of life that he's imposing on his family also isn't good. Maybe it's not probably not equally as bad as the devil's way of life. But I think that's the message, is that these are two like contrasting extremes.
Yeah, and I think just to add on that, because I totally agree, and I think him as as a Jesus figure, I view it more as like he's a figure only in so much as a jester would be. Like it's like almost the theater that Black Phillip is trying to impose on them of how much of a joke he finds this all to be. I mean, ultimately, he could have killed them all from the get go. We at the end, he just gores him. There's no reason he couldn't have done it earlier. I think the only reason he doesn't do it until the end is because he's essentially trying to. The story is showing the pipeline of from one group to the other, one extreme to the other. And in this instance, because at the beginning, Anya Taylor-Joy is a good daughter and she is religious, she prays, and maybe she isn't as devout as her parents, but she seems like she's trying to be a doting daughter and she loves her family, right? What does it take to get a person that's like that, a young girl, to then being a witch and like a follower of Satan in this story is for everyone to betray her and everyone to be willing to not trust her and claim that she's a traitor. So I think that that's part of it too, is like, what how is society at that point in time built in such a way that it would incentivize an intelligent, potentially rebellious woman to not go the easy route and go, all the way to the wicked. But it's not really her fault. It's just the system around her is so fucked up, and these people, are all like predisposed to think that she could be a sinner because she's an attractive, intelligent woman.
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about him, I think it's giving me more clarity because, like, if I think about, I mean, the limited knowledge I have of religion, I mean, the devil is like he works for God. He is like his mission is to be out there tempting folks and like testing their
Well, I don't know if
beliefs.
I'd say if he works for him.
No, I think he does. He's like a fallen angel. Like if we really like, I'm not the expert on this, but if you really read about it, like he's like one of he was like an angel. He fell, and like his now job is like to like test people, test their faith, and tempt them. So like maybe it's like the Puritan way of living isn't it didn't hold up. Like it wasn't why he didn't kill him right away on the farm, because that's not really what he does. He doesn't just go out killing folks. He's not Jason, you know. He's like testing their faith, and their faith didn't hold up because it wasn't strong enough, you know.
Yeah, but I don't even think it was a test of faith because ultimately they were all fairly devout and they don't gain anything from it. And even, I mean, they take the child before they even have a chance and before the child's been baptized, which according to their faith means that he doesn't get to go to heaven. You know, like if in theory Satan was acting on behalf of God, which I think that would be an odd reading. I haven't heard of a lot of Christian readings where Satan is anything other than like loathed and destroyed by God. Like he's in hell as a punishment because he fell as an angel because of his pride. I don't think it would make sense for him to work for him if he is, you know, essentially breaking God's own rules of not allowing the child to be baptized and punishing the family before they're even tested.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't know about Jonas, but all the other characters like commit sin, right? Like the father is like lying to his family, and he's not able to provide for them. The mother is like breaking from her religion, like she's not able to be like what she's signed
abusive.
Up to be. Yeah. You know, the twins. I don't know. They're just straight up talking to the goat. The Caleb is like, I guess the thing that they get him for is like sex stuff. He's
lust.
Lust. There you go. And then Anya Taylor-Joy is the last one to hold on to her faith. You know, she's reciting her prayers. She's like, no, I believe whatever. It's not till everything is gone, everything is lost. She's had to kill her own mother, and there's nowhere else to turn. That then she turns to the devil. So that would be my reading of it. I mean, we'd have to look more into the religious stuff. I'm sure Eggers did, and I'm sure it all has a lot of meaning and lines up with whatever he was trying to do.
Yeah, and just for some other pieces that I like about it, like I even just want to touch on like the shots in the woods, really like beautiful, well done. The sequence with like the horse where he falls off, forgets everything. Like I don't know, I just love a lot of those scenes. The scene of Caleb's, I don't think we could call it an exorcism because there wasn't a priest there actually exorcising the demon, but when the demon possesses him and he ultimately dies and spits up the apple, which was the thing that he lied about to like protect his dad, all of that I thought was excellently written and done.
Yeah, me too. In that scene, also, like I know I'm getting into this is stuff I'm interested in talking about, but I'm getting away from it because I keep bringing like this kind of stuff to it. But like, is that maybe another evidence that Thomason was the good one? Is that when she joins like the prayer circle, he's able to like give himself over to God. Like he finally is able to like beat that demon and like go into heaven, you know? And they make a comment about that like the dad does, that she like helped push him along, you know?
No, but well, I should say I'm a little hazy because I watched this like about a month ago.
Oh, okay.
But again, my memory of that scene is that he actually was possessed the whole time, and when he's kind of like enrapturous and seems less in pain when she enters the room, I think that's just that. I think the devil still has control over him, but again, he's just mocking the family essentially.
I think when he spits out the apple, it's then like he's dead, and he's like, this is him like passing on to, because then he finally like sees God, and he's like he's yelling and all that. But I don't know if there's an answer to this one.
Well, because he claims that the reason he was gone was he was looking for apples, which was a lie.
Yeah.
So I thought it was like basically the devil being like, hey, you lied to your mother/wife about this. I'm listening. And like the last act you have with your son is remembrance of the lie that ultimately got him killed. Like it was just one more twist of the knife, essentially.
Well, and he also gives into his lust, right? He's tempted by that witch, like the hot witch, and he gives in. But yeah, I'll give you a couple more things I like about it. So I think one of the best scenes is when after that scene, after Caleb dies, Thomason runs out, and her father runs out after, and you think he's like gonna comfort her, and he's on her side, and then he slowly like turns on her. He's like, listen, we'll put you on the stake, we'll get a committee, like we'll see if you're actually a witch. And she's like, wait, what? No, like I'm not a witch. Like I think that's the best. Like it's like the final, like the person you think is gonna be still riding for her, like he's then even you realize he's against her too. I think that scene is so good. And then I also think like when they're in the woods alone, and Caleb has the big gun, and he's trying to whistle, like his dad, but he can't. Like he's not a man yet. You know, he's like he's trying, but he can't. I think that scene's so good too. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I also like. I feel like there is the first time you're watching the movie, you feel like William the father is just terrible at everything he's trying to do out there because he fails at everything. I do think after a couple rewatches, there's parts of me that I think it's actually a bit ambiguous of just how good or bad or competent or otherwise he is at these things. Because, like, for instance, the crops, like the corn won't grow. I believe it's corn, or grain of some sort. Like that seems like it's actually because of some sort of pestilence that the witch has put onto the farm. And I feel like that can be kind of strung out as well to the fact that I think it's a rabbit he tries to catch within the trap somehow escapes. The one that I think is more clearly his fault is when he shoots the gun, it goes off and like powder goes in his eyes, so things like that. Like there seems like, okay, he's not actually competent at this one particular thing, but I do think it's on a first watch an effective way to be like, oh, okay, like, you know, maybe they are just down on their luck because they're not equipped for this. But by the end of it, you start to realize just like how this entire story was out of their control the whole time from the get-go.
Well, I mean, they decided to leave the colony, though, right? Like he's doing his best, but he's ultimately at fault for leaving the colony. Now it's because of his faith that he put them in that situation, right? So maybe that's an even bigger question. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The first time, I'm all like, oh man, he's doing his best. And then, yeah, the second time I was like, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know if he's such a good guy. I don't know if that's what you were saying, but that was my read on it, at least.
No, I mean, no, I definitely agree. And I think he admits himself that it's his fault that they're in this situation. That's when he's eating the dirt,
right,
and praying to God that he would be killed and his children would be spared. Like, I think he's a good father, ultimately. I think by the end, I think essentially his mind or his psyche has broken by the end. And I mean, you know, clearly there's some degree of possession going on with at least certain members of the family, both the twins for sure, Catherine, the wife, for sure. So I don't think it's like out of bounds to think that he's also, if he's not directly influenced by that, like his interaction with that for several weeks. Also, the entire time you have to keep in mind they're essentially starving. Like,
yeah,
they're sharing one slice of bread essentially for dinner, and have nothing else to eat. So I think he's a good man. I think the whole story is really like intended to be hopeless and pointless, essentially. Like, I think you're right that if they had never left town, this never would have happened. And so he embraces his fault, almost the original sin, as it were, of why this is happening and why they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I think from that point on, the story is really just about like these people are just messing with forces, or they're not even intentionally doing it, but they're being, you know, attacked by forces that are utterly beyond their means to address. And just because they're Puritans and they pray doesn't mean that they have the equipment to do that.
Yeah, definitely. A couple more things, then we can move on to like
Yes.
some of what's holding back. So I think I just like how the emphasis on the wood chop, and it was like all he can do for his family. You know, he can't grow crops, but this man can chop wood. You know, he's got a big pile of wood, and every time things are going bad, he's out there, he's chopping his wood. I just think that's good.
I love that too. Yeah, I love that as like him trying to control whatever small sliver of his kingdom that he can, and just how pointless it ends up being. It's great that it falls on his head.
Yeah. And then I think we gotta have our own section for this, because now it's come up on every episode we do, which is like scenes I definitely didn't cry during, but maybe teared up a little bit, you know, but not like a full cry.
It can be a full cry. Yeah, no, let's do it.
Well, I think it's when they're overhearing the parents talking, and they're all like it just pans up and all the kids are listeling to the parents talking about shit.
That she's gonna get sent to another farm.
That's tough. It's a sad one. And then my last thing, because I just feel like everything is so purposeful. In the first scene, when they're leaving the colony, Anya Taylor-Joy is the last one to turn away. There's got to be a reason for that. Everyone else walks away, and she's still standing there looking at the like governor or whoever that is. And I just think I think maybe that's like foreshadowing for the rest of the movie, where she's still the last one holding on to her faith when all else is lost, and she's the the final girl, basically.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good read on it for sure. I think also maybe just practically, it's a way to tell the viewer like, hey, this is our main character, so it's like a little bit of an introduction. But I think that's a great read as well about her recognizing maybe something her parents don't, which again, I think a really big part of this story, and it's the story of quote unquote rich witchcraft, or at least witch hunts in America, is so much of it is really predicated around the idea of fear of like change and different. And in this one avenue, it's fear of powerful women, I think, is a really big underlying element of it. And power in the form of intelligence and attraction. I mean, ultimately, what Kate Dickie's accusation towards Anya Taylor-Joy is that she's seducing her father and her brother, which is obviously beyond twisted, but like even her own mother makes it sexual. Like so I just think, yeah, that's a very interesting thing of why society was harming or like directed at these women in particular. But I think power and insecurity, I guess, are the flip sides of that coin.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So some of the things that I think is holding it back, I don't even want to say it's like worst, because I really think this movie is awesome. I think it's pretty much perfect. But I do think some of the cuts and like some of the camera movements, not necessarily like, I think there's great shots like you talked about before with the wood. There's actually one really cool shot where it's like when I think they're burying Caleb and it's just the dad and the mom outside. It's just this huge wide shot with the farm. But I think some of the way the camera moves and some of the, like the cutting, like it's not quite in sync. I mean, that's just like a little nitpick, but I think when you look at this and then you look at the Lighthouse, which is so like thought out of how the camera moves and how everything looks, you can definitely tell that like you got a lot better with seeing those movies. And then there's one like my favorite scene when she's outside with her dad and she's getting upset and like they're fighting, her accent goes like full on modern. And it's like the only time it's the only time in the movie where it does this. And I hate to like nitpick the accents, but it just goes like full like 2024 girl like fighting with her dad.
No, that's so valid. I mean, the whole point of the movie is that, or a huge point of it, is supposed to be period accurate. So I think that's a valid take. I don't really have any major criticism I want to give it. I guess if I had one like nitpick, it would be, I just really love the first 95% of this movie. And I like the last 5% too. But if I had to say there was a part that maybe it didn't have the same momentum or like energy for me, it is a little bit when she goes to the seance with the other witches at the very end. Because prior to that, like it's very much like the beast is in the shadows sort of horror, where you're not really, you get that scene at the beginning and you do get a jump with the witch and you get to see Black Phillip's boot when he transforms, but it's very much cloak and dagger. And then at the seance, it's suddenly like, it's lit by a fire, but still quite a bit of light. And you're seeing, these women fly and whatnot. And it just isn't as mysterious as like the other elements. So I still enjoyed it. I wouldn't, knock it, but just it's a little bit of like a tonal shift, I would say, compared to the rest of the movie.
That's a great point. I didn't have that down, but now that I think about it, definitely. I mean, I think it lands a little bit soft with that, and I think if they had cut it when she's walking to the woods with Black Phillip, it would have been more impactful. And then one other thing on this, I mean, I hate to call this an issue, but now that I found out she's 18, I guess I can. The body double looks nothing like her. Like it's like completely not her at all.
When she's walking into the woods?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice this.
And I thought it was because she was underage. I'm like, they had to get a body double, and makes sense. I'm not even going to bring this up because I'm going to get my house is going to get raided. But like, it just looks literally nothing like her.
That's so funny.
But yeah, whatever. And yeah, I mean, that's really all. I was going to ask you one question on it, then we can. I know we were taking a little bit of time on this one, but I think this is the one I wanted to talk the most about.
Yeah,
anyways.
Agreed.
So, if you had to swap anyone in the family, you don't have to say who you swap it with, but like, who's the weak link in the family? Is there anybody?
Do you mean swap in terms of actor, or you would want like,
yeah, like does
the
anybody...
Terminator there to fight the witch?
No. Does anybody in the family like hold the movie back at all, where you're like, no, I need one of the twins to be like, one of the twins like isn't good, you know? Is there anybody?
No, I mean, if I were to change anyone, it would certainly be one of the twins for
Yeah.
sure. But no, I don't think anyone's holding it back.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I
Yeah,
had the same. I was like, you know, the parents are perfect. Caleb and Anya Taylor Joy are like next level for their age, and the twins are fine.
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty good. Like the casting's pretty good. I think it's great actually. So yeah, how do you score this one?
This was a 4.5 for me. It's like you said at the top, it's just one of my favorite horror movies of all time, certainly modern horror movies. And in a way, I actually think it's like a little reductive to call it a horror because it's just so different than what I think the quintessential horror movie is. Like to me, this is more than anything, it's a family drama with horror elements or in the backdrop of a horror movie. But like what makes the movie work is that the dynamics between them are so real. And by the end, when William accuses his daughter, like you were just mentioning a second ago, like you think he's going to comfort her because he really has been trying to comfort her. He's been, he's stuck in this rock and hard place of like wanting to support his children, but also having to deal with his wife, who's understandably freaking the fuck out too. Although the way she's freaking out might not be logical. But anyway, so when there is the turn at the end where he's like, no, we're going to have to string you up, Thomas, and you're like, oh my God. And that only works because you believe in the dynamic between them. And you thought you could trust this guy. So
Yeah.
I love this movie. I think it's really excellent. I would like to see more movies like it, and I wouldn't say that they're missing because, like we said at the top as well, Robert Eggers is making more of these movies. So, yeah, I love it. What about you, John?
Yeah, me too. It's a 4.5 for me. I think the story's so good. I love the isolation, and if you're identifying with Anya Taylor Joy's character, you just feel so isolated. And I think it's definitely a horror movie. And I like your point about maybe that's even not enough to just give it that label. I can't believe how good all the kids are in it.
Yeah,
I mean,
what a roll of the dice too.
oh my gosh, yeah, it's incredible. And I think the parents are perfect too, but like the kids' performances really drive this movie, and I think it could have easily not made any money at all if they weren't great. And I think they're all great. So yeah, 4.5, love it.
I also like at this point, I almost watch this like every other year. Like I think this is just such a go-to Halloween movie for me now. Like it's just so fucking good. It's so entertaining. It's made so well. Anyway, yeah, we don't have to, I'm just gonna keep saying how much I like this movie for another hour, but I think it fucking rocks. And I'm so glad that I got you onto Eggers through this. Like I've been proselytizing The Witch this year more than ever. So I'm glad that people are listening.
Yeah, and I think if I came back and I was like, this sucks, like maybe we wouldn't have this podcast.
No, we would not. It would be over.
Let's start with The Lighthouse.
Let's do it.
I mean, I think this is it's like a 180 from The Witch, and I think it's because it focuses more on like the visuals and how visually appealing you can make it, and I don't understand the story at all or really connect with the characters at all. And I think it shows Eggers' range, and people obviously like it, and I do like it. Like I might talk about it like in this segment, like I don't. I think it's super unique. I don't know if there's anything else from this century that you could compare this to, but it's definitely very different than The Witch, and very different than The Northman, and very different than anything else I've ever seen. How do you feel about The Lighthouse?
I completely agree with everything you just said. Like similar to The Witch. So none of these movies, I didn't see any of these in theater. The Witch, Lighthouse, or The Northman, but I saw The Lighthouse probably about like a year after it came out or something, video on demand. And I watched it initially kind of going into it almost as like, this is an art house film. I'm really watching this more so as a completionist and so that I can be part of the conversation around it, because as soon as it came out, there was a lot of talk about it. And this was a big part of like, obviously Willem Dafoe is incredible and he's in so many movies recently. But it was also a big part of Robert Pattinson kind of coming back into the fold of mainstream Hollywood. And then, Eggers had that first huge movie. So anyways, there's a lot of momentum going into it, a lot of discourse going on around it when it came out. And so I watched this movie, and it almost felt like a little bit of a chore, if I'm being totally honest. Like, I don't know if I really want to watch this. And again, this was before I had kind of come back into my full cinephile mode, and had more appreciation and patience for these things. But the first time I watched it, first of all, I think this is a movie I would actually recommend you have subtitles on, which normally I am never a subtitles guy, but I just think it is challenging to get through the dialogue without it. I would say the first time I went through it, I would describe it as I appreciated it, but I maybe didn't enjoy it. I thought it did a lot of unique, cool things. First of all, the aspect ratio is much more of a square rather than widescreen, which is what we're more used to, in order to try and match more of the historic time period. So I thought those things were very cool. I really enjoyed the monologues that both of them gave, especially Willem Dafoe gives some crazy Shakespearean quotes when he's screaming "hark" and issuing a curse onto Robert Pattinson. So I thought it was very cool. I didn't necessarily love it the first time I saw it, but I still probably gave it a 3. And I would say, having rewatched it now, I've actually grown to enjoy it a lot more. Like, I think there's more like intentional comedy going on than I recognized the first time around. Like, just how completely broken these two guys are from the get-go. Like, as much as it's about them going crazy, these dudes were like just shells of men going into this shift. So I think some of that's really funny. Like, I mean, even Willem Dafoe crying over Robert Pattinson not liking his cooking, things like that, I appreciated more this time go around, because I recognized, oh my God, it's supposed to be funny. So I wasn't sure of that the first time, but I enjoyed it more the second time because of it.
Yeah, and Pattinson actually said, direct quote, "This is 100% a comedy." And when it was going into the award season, he thought it should make a push for and the Golden Globes, like the comedy and what is it, comedy drama or comedy, whatever that how they split the best picture into two. So yeah, I definitely did not pick up on that the first time. I mean, there's definitely some laughs, but yeah, I mean, I watched it the first time I watched it, I was like, this is amazing cinematography. I have no idea what's going on, and exactly what you just said, I appreciate this more than I enjoy it. And then second time, it was like, okay, now that I know that nothing really is gonna happen, I kept thinking something big was gonna happen, and we can talk about that, and if actually there is some big moments, 'cause I guess there are. But I kept expecting something more than I was getting. And so I watched it, not expecting that much and just trying to take it in for what it is. And I felt exactly the same about it. It was like, yep, great cinematography. Still don't really get it or connect with these characters. And, cool. Log that one again. And yeah, if I talk about just a little bit of summary, and then we can get into the best and worst of it. So should I... Keeping secrets, are ye? Should I have done that in more of an accent?
Keeping secrets, are ye?
Yeah, see, that's what I mean.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. 2 lighthouse keepers try to maintain their sanity while living on a remote and mysterious New England island in the 1890s. It's got a 4.0 average letterbox with 1.4 million viewed. It had an $11 million budget and an $18 million box office. So it didn't do super well, but I think it's been talked about so much. It's definitely the one that people like the most. I don't know if that's because it's more art house. People think it's cooler to log this as 5. I don't know.
I think it's that.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's 100% that. I think it's also legitimately a really good movie. I wouldn't fault anyone for liking it, but no. I think it's popular to like this one the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I even feel like
fashionable.
I feel like I'm scoring it probably too high, but we can talk about that at the end. In terms of it comes back into the scoring conversation we had on the last one of how you score it. But if it's based on how much I like it, I mean, I don't love this movie, but I appreciate what it's doing. It's very unique. Let me give you a couple production things. So this actually I thought was pretty interesting. So the idea first emerged from Max Eggers, his brother, re-envisioning of Edgar Allan Poe's unfinished story with the same name called The Lighthouse. Robert Eggers assisted in development and really changed the story. So I read this Edgar Allan Poe short story. It's not much of a story. It's two lines of dialogue, or a couple lines of dialogue, and has nothing to do with this movie. So like it was like an inspiration point for them, but it really does not tie to this at all. So I was hoping that there'd
Hmm.
be something in there that it would help me understand this movie more, but there was not. And actually, he tried to do this first. So they were trying to get this financed when he got funding for The Witch. So I don't know if that's better or worse. I was thinking about like, would this movie be better if it had like a witch approach with a smaller budget and like lesser known stars, or is it only even in the conversation because you have Defoe and Pattinson? And I don't know. What do you think about that?
That's a really interesting question. Like, it's almost would the limitation of the financing he originally had benefit the movie? I think in the sense of it would have made it more slightly more mainstream, probably. Like I don't think he would have taken some of the risks that he took with this. I think there's a comfortability knowing that he made I think a sizable amount of money on that first one too. So like I'm not saying that he's buying a house in the hills, but like he probably to an extent knew going into this one like I'm not going to be homeless if this bombs, which I think is actually like a very freeing artistic factor, which I would hope more artists could have, but I get your point of how this would change how he would shoot it. I personally wouldn't flip it because I just love The Witch too much. I wouldn't want to fuck with that scenario. And
Mm-hmm.
if The Witch turned out a little more art house than I would like it, then I don't know. Maybe that'd be cool too. But I don't want to lose what I have.
Yeah, I mean it's with double the budget and bigger actors, maybe then he's, but then also there is a story he's trying to tell here. It is based off of a bunch of things. It's just not as clear to me as what the Witch and the Northman are trying to do. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
Northman is like the clearest. Like and I'm actually really excited to talk about that with you because I don't think we've ever talked about that. But with this one, I really just don't get what, like. There's a lot of themes. There's a lot of references to things. Like Poseidon and like Prometheus, and there's a ton of references, but I don't get the actual story and like how it ties together. And maybe with a smaller budget and unknown actors, he would have focused more on that, and it would have been a better story, or a story I appreciated more. But then to your point, we got what we got. I wouldn't want it any other way, and I think it showed his range as a director of like, look what I can do with a cool camera, and I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
whatever I want and put it in this like 1:19:1 aspect ratio, black and white, and maybe that worked out for the best. Obviously, people like this movie.
Yeah, I ultimately agree to the point where I have like basically the same note written down in my notes. So just to play devil's advocate, though, I do think it's ultimately this movie's trying to do something very different than certainly The Northman and slightly even from The Witch, in that those movies have like I feel like more of a defined plot in terms of we're starting at point A and we're getting to point B, with one of them being about revenge and one of them being about being betrayed so much that you go to the side of darkness. I think this movie is not necessarily going on that same path, and it's more a character study of these two men. And as much as it's about the compounding psychiatric breakdown that they're feeling from all this tension and abuse and power dynamics, in a way it's almost as those things get layered, the layers that these people or these two men have put on themselves actually fall away, and they become more honest in a lot of ways. And in some ways that honesty is showing themselves as brutal and animals and evil and sick. In other ways, it's them just being honest about their guilt and other items about themselves. So I think if you view it more as a character study rather than an attempt to like have a traditional arc, that at least makes me enjoy it a little bit more. But I will say now, I mean, a little early, but one of the issues I had with the movie is I do just wish there was a little more clarity by the end of it. It really in any regard. Like I'm not asking for like a buttoned up everything gets answered. But if we were to even get a single answer, like one answer by the end, I would really enjoy it. Maybe like just how much was Willem Dafoe lying, or just how much was Robert Pattinson crazy? Was he actually, eaten by these ghouls at the end? Things like that. Or did Willem Dafoe actually kill the last person that was there? Or was that just purely a hallucination that was in the crab trap? So the head of
Right.
the last partner. So I think if we had gotten even just a little bit more clarity, or what's even in the lighthouse, like there's just a few too many ambiguous points about the movie for me to fully buy into it or fully love it as much as his other works. But I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I like everything you said, and I think that's probably the best way to try to enjoy it as this character study. And I think to the points you just made, I start to struggle where I can't trust the story I'm being told. And I think it just takes this weird turn at the end where like first like he's like, no, what, that was 2 weeks ago. Like he's like, that wasn't yesterday, that was 2 weeks ago. I'm like, what? And then he's like, oh, you just smashed the boat up with an axe. And William Dafoe's like, no, you just did that. I'm like, what? Like, huh? Like, so then I'm just totally like, it totally loses me when now I can't even trust what I'm seeing. You know, it'd be one thing to not be able to trust Pattinson's stories, which and I like that he, you know, he lies about his name, then he reveals that, you know, he gives a story in pieces, and that's an interesting character study of this guy who's running from something in Canada. He killed a guy. He took his name. He's trying to start fresh, and Defoe also has a bit of a shady past. He may or may not have killed his last partner, and you know, he has this weird control thing over the light, and they have this odd relationship, and like looking at their relationship and studying that. But then when like I'm getting just straight lied to because of like I'm being shown something and then told something different, I think that's where I take the biggest issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's having the unreliable narrator, I think, is always a bit of a rocky slope to climb, where it's like sometimes it's done really well, sometimes it's not done as well. I think this is just pushed to like the nth degree of like these people are not only unreliable to us in that like or to each other because they're lying, they're also fucking insane. So it might not even be lying anymore so much as they've lost touch with reality.
That's
also,
what I think it is. Well, sorry, that's what I think it is. Like, I think he's hallucinating, and that's what I read.
Yes.
I was like, is he seeing a sea monster up there, or he's hallucinating? But he's not drunk yet. He hasn't drank yet. I'm supposed to believe, and he's already hallucinating a sea monster. So it's just like very misleading.
Yeah, well, and then you throw in there's the psychosis, there's the drinking, there's maybe like existing mental illness away from, you know, prior to all this. And then you throw in that maybe the island is actually cursed because he killed this seagull.
Right.
So it's like, there's just one or two or a couple too many like ambiguous points here, which I think was intentional. I think that like,
sure.
Again, I like the movie more when I view it as like these things are done. It's like the nth extreme of them so that we can strip away, just as we layer on the abuse, we strip away all of the facade that are these men. Like, I love one piece of the movie that I didn't really notice the first time around. Robert Pattinson has the mustache. So his character's actual name is Thomas Howard. We find out he takes on the name of Ephraim Winslow after he kills him, or, well, it's ambiguous. We don't know. Did he kill him or did he let him die? But when we see the shots of Ephraim Winslow, he has the same mustache. And I think that's just another layer. I didn't really put it together of like Robert Pattinson is just trying to worm his way into this other shell of living this guy's entire life. He probably never even had the mustache prior. But anyway, so I love those elements of like stripping it away, but I do agree that the narrative itself is pretty crazy, and it just drags on a little too long, I would say. Like, I think if we had gone full crazy for like 15, 20 minutes at the end, I think I could have done it, but it's really closer to like about 45 minutes of you no longer know what's real or not. And I think that that's just a little too much.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I think if it was even just a little shorter, it would have been more manageable.
Yeah, maybe I will do this one. I'll hit you with a couple more of my bad things, and we can go back to the best because there is some good in this. But I'm almost through all my bad stuff.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's other things that I didn't really understand how they tied to the story, right? So, like the mermaid figurine. Is it really just that he's like looking at that for like pleasure? Is there nothing more to that he was found that in the bed? Was it the last guy's? Like, when I first saw it, I thought, okay, this was something that the last guy had, and it like had some spirit in it, and it caused all this. Like, this is like an evil totem or whatever. And it seems like that's just not the case. That it's just a little figurine.
Well, I mean, I guess it's unclear. I don't think that we know. I think you're totally right. It's like certainly foreshadowed that he finds it in the bed of the last guy who killed himself allegedly. And then he starts using it, and then he starts having visions of a mermaid that he's having sex with. And it's unclear. I mean, he's drinking, he's doing all this stuff. So I think it's just unclear. I think it's ambiguous.
Yeah, and then my other thing, which I think I have a little bit bigger issue, and it ties to what we were talking about, is like the ending. And unfortunately, I know my Greek history because my dad was a classics major, so I'm unfortunately well versed on Greek mythology.
John, I didn't know you were a Greek history guy. I love Greek history.
I mean, I don't love it, but I know it, unfortunately. But Prometheus, right? So he takes the fire from the gods, and he meets the same end where he's getting pecked to death by crows, whatever. So, okay, like I watched the movie, I say, oh, yeah, Prometheus. I know Prometheus. So what does that have to do with the story? Like, does that tie into anything? Like, does it mean anything for the story? Am I learning anything from having that piece of knowledge that they're referencing a Greek myth? I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, it's one thing to reference it, but like, what's the contextual relevance of it?
Exactly.
Like, what's the actual tie-in? And you could even say something similar with the shot of Willem Dafoe that was pulled from that painting. I can't remember the title of it. But do you know what I'm talking about? Where he's looking at him with like almost the laser vision. It almost looks like a sci-fi.
Right.
He's holding his hand. He's naked.
Right.
Ultimately, yes. I enjoyed those. Because I was like, all right, this is just kind of a exciting, interesting thing to put in here. It doesn't look like anything I've seen. Ultimately, it does hold it back from being like my favorite or most enjoyed movie of the year, and it did kind of it compounded my expectation of this as an art house sort of film. So as much as they're like, well, it's a comedy, sometimes when there's shots like that, it's like, okay, well, is this intended to be comedic that you're cutting to this, or are you actually being like reverent of the existing art that you're referencing?
Yeah, that's a good point. And then I had one more thing. I mean, everything we talked about right now is more of my like higher level stuff for why this doesn't really land for me. The one like actual nitpick I have is that like I think Robert Pattinson sounds terrible. Like he sounds like John F. Kennedy. And
it does sound like John F. Kennedy.
It's like Eli Roth when he's doing like the Boston accent in Inglourious Bastards, and it's just like a little bit off. It's like not quite there. And maybe it's that Dafoe sounds so good and so exact. Like, I have no idea. I've never met a guy from 1860, but this is exactly, like, Dafoe is exactly how I think it would sound. And then Pattinson is just, like, not. So that would be my only other thing with it. It's just the accent is tough.
Yeah, I think it's definitely odd. It sounds a little Kennedy for sure. I mean, they did do a lot of research on, like, the enunciations that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but, like, he and Dafoe and Pattinson are not only separated, or at least their dialects are not only separated by age, but also by career and by geography. And so Dafoe, and again, this is another thing that is unclear. Was he ever a sailor? Because I think at one point, then it's, at one point Pattinson is claiming that he's not. Anywho, so I don't know. I gave it a pass on that, but I don't think it's crazy for anyone to find it a little bit odd. It is a little jarring and a little too JFK.
Yeah, no, it's totally JFK. What do you have?
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple items. So what do I want to touch? One thing I really liked about it, and this is actually kind of a subtle one. I think this is my hot take for the movie. I think Willem Dafoe in this movie is a seagull.
Okay, give it to me.
I think in like the Greek way of a lot of Greek stories are creatures, spirits, animals go into human flesh and, they can embody it, or gods will do that, vice versa, go into an animal form. Dafoe, the scene where he's chasing Pattinson with the axe, we understand that he has a limp because of some injury that's ambiguous in his past. Right. But the way he runs has this very distinct galloping motion to it that looks identical to how a seagull runs on the beach.
Okay.
I'm telling you, if you watch this, you will not be able to not notice it. I only noticed it at this rewatch. And I think that actually kind of compounds well with, he was saying seagulls are the spirits of sailors that have died at sea. I think it would make sense with either there is the scenario of Willem Dafoe has himself died or something, and he's now essentially this creature of the sea, or he almost gives off vibes of he is like this priest or like religious figure of the sea. So it makes sense that he has that little bit of overlap. But that's my hot take is it also is why he was so serious about don't kill the seagull. That's why they get cursed. Like, it would make sense why he either believes it or knows it to be true.
Yeah. No, I like that. I did not notice that, but I think that's fair.
I also loved Defoe's one-liners in this of like, you spilled your beans, or just screaming hark is incredible. Those are the moments where I'm like, okay, this is clearly comedic. I do love all of the there's a lot of homoerotic undertones as well as overtones in this movie, because they almost kiss at various points. And there's also a scene where Robert Pattinson wakes up with his pants around his ankles, and it seems like I don't know, they might have had sex. It's unclear. I do want to. So anyway, I love all those like sequences of like they go from hyper masculinity and violence to immediately holding each other and just like wanting comfort and physical touch, and vice versa. Also, I just have to call out, I think it was a little hungover maybe on like when I rewatched this, or maybe I had been recently, so I just kind of remembered the feeling. But Robert Pattinson taking their bedpans out to the cliff and throwing them, and the scream he makes when they splash back into his face, I think is actually the most horrifying thing I've seen in cinema this year.
Oh yeah, that's a rough one. I just think him waking up too that morning is so awesome. Like I think I really like this when they get drunk and then the aftermath. Like I think that is really enjoyable.
You know, that has to be like the worst hangover anyone's ever had in their life.
I mean, is that when they're like drinking kerosene, or is that before that? But when they're drinking like the oil, that's when when they're mixing with the honey. That's when it gets really wild.
So fucked.
But yeah, no, I really like that when they're getting lit and they're singing and dancing. And then you mentioned this. So I love when he disses his cooking. I think that's so funny. And he's like so hurt. He's
so mad about it.
Yeah, he's so. Oh, not even mad. He's hurt. He's upset.
Yeah, no, that's a better way. Yeah, he is hurt. He's so vulnerable in that moment.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, and I know you like my lobster. You love me lobster is a great line in there.
Yeah,
too,
he won't
which
let it
is
go.
Not subtle either, of like clearly being phallic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, I've said most of the things I like about this movie, so I'll just put a button on it before touching on a couple little nitpicks I have. But I found it very interesting, and I think if you again look at it through the point of view of like this, more than any other Eggers movie, I view as a stage production come to the silver screen, and it is really about this character study of these two men and the emotional scars and the emotional sins that they're kind of reckoning with in their own lives. Like if you look at their trauma and their psychosis as like a reflection of their own sickness and their own misdeeds coming, to the flesh, I think I like this movie more in that point of view. And then it's kind of funny saying that at the same time also being like, but also just know that like it's intended to be a comedy. Like I think those things have made me like the movie more, even if they seem a little counterintuitive. And I just love how unique it is. Like, I mean, it's a big swing. If nothing else, this movie is a huge swing. And as much as it's kind of annoying when pretentious film heads like us say like, this is the best one yet, 5-star, only for, I mean, if you feel that way, I love it. But if you're only doing that because it's popular, it's a little frustrating. But like, that aside, like I just think it's really exciting whenever a filmmaker, especially a young one or younger one, makes something so different than everything else we're seeing in theaters.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you have for some of the bad stuff?
I mentioned it earlier. I think the psychosis portion of it just goes too long. It's a little too long. And maybe that was intentional because it's trying to make us as the viewer start to be confused as well about what the timeline is. I could certainly see that, but I think it's a little too long. And the other bigger piece, which I also mentioned, was just I wish we got clarity in any one point. I think that there's just so many ambiguous areas. If they had clarified even just one of them, what was in the light, who was lying, even just more or less, I don't need to know the exact amount. Was the previous partner actually murdered or actually crazy? How much of this is being hallucinated? How much of this is magic? So I just wish we had gotten anything, just a little bit more. And I really like things that are mystical and like ambiguous, but this was just, I think, too far even for me.
Yeah, I think for me to appreciate it as a character study, I would have, like, they don't have to explain all those things, but just like something to let me know who these guys were, like who was telling the truth. Just something. I needed, so I agree with you. I needed something there at the end. Yeah, and then I like it. I mean, I like I said before, I'm impressed by it. I think more than I enjoy it. Like if you want to get into scoring now.
There actually is one other thing I wanted
Okay,
to
go ahead.
touch on.
Yeah.
Just quickly, and this is another ambiguous piece, but there are a lot of parallels between Defoe and Pattinson's characters. It almost is implied that Pattinson is becoming Defoe because of the way that they call each other. You know, Defoe calls Pattinson his dog, but eventually Pattinson makes Defoe his dog.
Right.
They both go crazy while they're living on this place and start drinking this crazy kerosene honey mixture. Pattinson, probably the biggest part is Pattinson seems to potentially break his leg at the end after becoming obsessed with the light, and he falls down the ladder and breaks his leg, which would be a very believable reason for why Defoe has a limp that never got fixed. Like, it feels like there's supposed to be potentially an implication that if it's not like this is like a hereditary cycle or some sort of cycle, then at least like it's a curse that's continuing on, maybe. But then it's like Pattinson is shown dead at the end, so it's unclear. So anyway, I just wanted to call out that's another part that I kind of liked, but also just goes unanswered.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess there is a lot of that kind of stuff of like it could be like an inner conflict, and it's like his own mind like grappling with what he's gonna become. Because it's like he doesn't drink at the beginning, and then he slowly is like an alcoholic, like Defoe and the leg thing, and he doesn't get to see the light at first, and he slowly is becoming more obsessed with the light. So yeah, I can see that.
Okay, I do have a couple hypotheticals before we go to scoring.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
What do you, if this isn't a hypothetical, what do you think is actually in the light, like in the lantern?
I think it's just a lantern. I don't know why they have such a reaction to it, but I mean, I think there's something there with the symbolism with Prometheus capturing the light. But I don't think there's anything like mystical up there. I think it's just the lantern. I don't know why. I mean, that's part of what I don't even have a good explanation for it because I don't know. Like, what do you think it is?
Okay, I have the same answer. Question number 2. Tommy claims that he's just looking for the right job where he can get a fair wage by working hard. What job is Tommy working in 2024 that finally makes him happy?
He's a management consultant?
He is a management consultant. Okay, question number 3. Would you have sex with a mermaid?
Not that one. I don't know.
What does that even mean?
Well, the actress, but in that
she's not bad enough?
In that one shot of her, when she's on the ground, I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Okay, wow.
I mean, maybe I'd take her out to dinner, but I mean,
you know what? I think your answer said everything we were asking for.
I don't know. Would you? I mean, yeah.
I don't know. I would have to think about it. All right, to the ratings. You want to go first?
Yeah. I mean, I give it a 3.5, which seems high based on how I just talked about it. But I mean, I think it's very impressive. I mean, I compare it to other movies. I give it a 3, and this is definitely above that. And why I wasn't like pumped to watch it again. I wasn't like dreading it. I was excited to kind of explore it again. It's just a different type of movie. It's not a movie that I'm gonna revisit probably a lot of times in my life. But it's definitely one that left an impression on me. And I think whatever he was going for, I think what we should talk about is what genre it's in. Because I'm not sure. Some people say it's horror. Some people say it's drama. It's very unique. And I appreciate that part of it. And I went with a 3.5 on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I gave it a 3.5 as well. I think for similar reasons. I think I like this movie more than you did. But especially, the first time I saw it, I think I might have only given it a 3 just because I just really do put a lot of value on, like, did I enjoy this experience, or did I at least appreciate or feel like I got something meaningful out of it? Like, there's a lot of different ways I can come out of a movie and be appreciative, whether I just laughed or felt emotional or felt something. And that first time I saw it, I think I was just like, this just felt so academic to me. Like, I felt like I did it because I had to a little bit. And Anyway, this time around, I do feel like I understood the humor it was trying to convey better and appreciated that side of it. And I still just do love the big swing of it. So, and it's so well made. Like, it's really uniquely shot. I love the aspect ratio again. And I just think, unlike so many other movies today, it's like trying to do something new and different and have a conversation that's just fundamentally different than the rest of most modern films. So 3.5 for me.
Pretty good. Ready to talk about the Northman?
Let's do it.
So I think this is a great, relatively straightforward action epic. It's got a great cast. It's got a big budget. And I think it hits all its marks. First time I saw this, I was like, this is awesome. This is exactly what I signed up for. I was a little confused by some of the mythology of like what was going on. And the second time I watched it, I think I liked it even more. I think I scored it the same way, but I realized stuff about it, which is like everything that happens in that movie is laid out in the beginning. Like they say everything that's going to happen. And along the way, they check in and Alex Skarsgård gets reminders on what he needs to do. And I just really like that about it. And we can talk about the specifics. I have some specifics.
Yeah, I want to hear that from you.
Yeah. Maybe we just jump right into this. But yeah, I mean, let me scroll down. Let's talk about that. So like, other than the minor twist, it's not minor, but it's not like it doesn't hugely impact the story, which is that his mother actually was like down with the uncle. Everything is foreshadowed. So it starts, he says, I swear I'll avenge you, father, if anyone kills you. That's what he's going to do. Even foreshadows it's going to be a flaming death for his uncle. His father says that. When he has that weird meeting with the priest after they conquer that one village, she lays it all out. His oath is carved out for him. What he's gonna do? They even mentioned that there's gonna be a daughter that that like will carry on his bloodline, and ends up being twins at the end. But it's all laid out what he has to do. His heart, I think this is a line in there. His heart shows only revenge, and he will not be able to choose his kin over the revenge. The revenge will take priority over like building a family with Anya Taylor-Joy and his children. And then it makes maybe for a second, when you're first watching it, you think, hey, maybe he might stay with her at the end. But no, they told you his heart knows only revenge. This is what he's going to do. This is his path. This is what he has to do. And yeah, I just think, I think it lays it all out for you. It's visually appealing. It's straightforward. It's action. And I really enjoy it.
I agree. Yeah. The first time I saw this, and I've only seen it twice now. I saw it probably a year after it came out, but I watched it on a flight on my phone, and it just kind of, I think it really hampered my ability to like appreciate what was actually getting done there, especially with this movie. I mean, like the cinematography always matters with any director, but in particular, if it's going to be like a sprawling epic that's supposed to be, you're seeing the high seas and all that, like clearly that's a really big part of the selling point. So I liked it way more this rewatch, and I think I appreciated it and picked up on a lot more of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Trying to think of.
Well, let me give you the summary. Then we can, while you look at your notes, so we can get into best and worst. Let me kind of, because I jumped right into it, but I really like this movie. I mean, I just think it really delivers. And we'll talk about how it did, though. So, I mean, the summary is: conquer your fate. Prince Amleth is on a verge of becoming a man when his father is brutally murdered by his uncle, who kidnaps the boy's mother. 2 decades later, Amleth is now a Viking who's on a mission to save his mother, kill his uncle, and avenge his father. It's got a 3.8 average. It's only been viewed by 820,000 people. I thought it was going to be more than that. All the other ones are over $1 million. It had a $70 to $90 million budget. I think it was originally 65 and ballooned up a bit. And then it only made 70 mil at the box office. So this is a big flop. It was a big swing with a big budget, and it was definitely considered a big flop. I'll just give you a little production stuff. So Skarsgård actually had the idea for this. It's just he's I mean, I think he's what is it, Norway? He's Norway? He's Norwegian?
Norwegian?
Yeah, or maybe he's Swedish. I don't know. But he's from
Swedish.
Yeah, he's Swedish. He's from this area. He wanted to make a Viking film for several years. Met with Eggers. They met to discuss possible options of movies and decided on this one. Skarsgård I really like. I think he's awesome in Succession, if you ever saw that. That
Yep.
was really the only kind of knowledge I had about him. And I think what's awesome about this movie is there's not these like high level things I think really to discuss like we talked about on the other two movie. I think it's just a pretty good action movie. Like you can talk about some of the mythology, and I think it all links to real stuff that Skarsgård was really interested in keeping in. But you can just watch it as an action movie and really enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. And to the bust component of it, I would be curious to see. So this movie came out early 2022, which the market, like the whole film industry, was still definitely reeling from COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, 2020 essentially deleted from history in terms of blockbuster movies coming out. 2021 still completely struggled. I believe there was one $800 million movie, which was Spider-Man No Way Home. And then the next closest in 2021 was, I think, like 300 million, and it was Shang-Chi, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to say, I mean, those two movies combined barely scratch $1 billion in 2021. So there just was not much of an appetite still, or at least people just weren't going in the way that they used to pre-COVID. And so I think that bled certainly into 2022 as well. It's really not until this year that we're starting to see the market has finally come back in a meaningful way. And even now, it's still not what it was 2018, 2019, which there's other reasons for that as well. I think like the Marvel of it all is certainly a big part of it. But it was unfortunate. I think if this movie had come out in a different year, it would have had more legs than it did. But I'm still curious to think or to know how much it's made with video on demand and some of the streaming platforms. Because ultimately, I mean, the fact that he's gotten renewed or Eggers has gotten Nosferatu, which seems there, I don't think there's a lot of budget information out. At least I wasn't able to find any online, but it looks like it's going to be at least comparable, if not more than this movie was. So I'd be curious to see how much money it actually made on the back end, not just including box office.
Yeah, I mean, I spent $8 because I rented it twice, so that should add in there.
And we salute you for that.
Yeah. I mean, if I look, I just pulled up the box office for 2022. I mean, Avatar at $2 billion, Top Gun Maverick at $1.4 billion, Jurassic World Domination $1 billion. Northman's 50 on this list. So there's a lot of like it's behind Detective Conan, The Bride of Halloween. I don't even know what this is. It's like and Chebby, My Fluffy Friend. I mean, we could read all these ones that beat it out, but
that's
it's
true.
Like,
I mean, there were some tent poles, but I think if you looked at what the overall income was for the industry, it was still very, very low compared to an average year or a pre-COVID year.
It makes sense. I'm just wondering why this did so poorly. Like, was there something that came out around the same time? Was it not reviewed well? I don't understand.
Sure. It. Yeah, I mean, it was also earlier in the year again. Like
okay.
Avatar came out that came out in December of 2022. Top Gun came out in I think it was July of 2022. So I mean, it's not a huge difference in time, but it's still substantial. I mean, there just hadn't really been a lot of stuff. But anywho, box office performance aside, the inspiration for this movie, I remember I first watched it and I was like, this is literally just Hamlet. What the fuck? And then looked it up, and actually this is the story that Hamlet, funnily enough, is based upon, which is then, a million different stories and movies are based off that. Obviously, Lion King would probably be the easiest to reference. So it is cool, again, to see Eggers going the route of like what are essentially is a folklore story that has just been more influential than the other two that he's done prior.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you want to touch on some of the actors on this?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have much other than Skarsgård. I mean, obviously Ethan Hawke's in it, and some other folks. So you got a William Dafoe cameo as well. But I didn't have much. I didn't do much background on them. But it's cool to see such great actors in it. I think it's also going to be great in Nosferatu to see some big stars.
The one call out I would say is it's interesting that Nicole Kidman is in this movie as Skarsgård's mother, because prior to this, they were both in the HBO series Big Little Lies, and they're married in that movie or in that show. God, anytime I call a show a movie or vice versa, I immediately feel like I sound like my parents because they do that all the time.
Well, I
But
think
anyways,
she wanted to get married in this one, right? What was that scene?
yeah, that was an odd pivot. I don't know that I needed that. I mean, maybe that's
Yeah.
some historical accuracy stuff, but I remember, it's funny you say that because I remember I saw I saw it, 3 years ago or something, and my memory of it was, I feel like there's a part where Skarsgård and Kidman weirdly like kind of is flirty with him or something, but I remember something happens. And then I was watching the sequence where they're talking. I was like, okay, yeah, I guess she's being, they're standing a little close. And then when they actually kissed, I was like, oh, okay, so fully, no, I wasn't interpreting anything wrong. That just did happen.
No, that happened. Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about some of the good stuff about it?
Yeah. Skarsgård, obviously, crazy shape for this. He's 44 when they film it. So pretty impressive physique for that point in time. Also, just want to call out, and I said this in my Letterboxd review, but his uncle Fjolnir, Klaes Bang is the actor's name. I think he's like 53 or 54 when they filmed this, and is absolutely shredded. So I will have actual things to say about this movie in a second, but I just want to call out respect. I mean, these guys are absolutely grinding. So I do think, before we get into the highs and lows, like, to me, I think both times I watch this, you can feel that Eggers is navigating what it is to make a movie that's just significantly bigger than his last one. And I think actually this kind of ties in with what we were saying the week before or last week with Christopher Nolan. Like, I feel like you didn't really get much of a sensation when he got the paycheck to do Batman Begins. It was like, wow, he really is like, he feels comfortable in this, and certainly it gets better with his later works like Dark Knight. But to me, I think you could tell that like he is clearly a director that is very much wanting control of like the narrative, the way that people talk, the way it's shot. And so he's now having to do the waltz that is working with a production company that's going to want more of a say on what the final cut looks like. And so I think that in some ways, maybe it struggles a little bit there, because this, it certainly is more of a traditional action movie than his other works are, like artistic expressions that are kind of pushing the ball forward in a different way. I think the second watch, I gained more appreciation for some of the things he still did do. Like, I think the ritual scenes with the Vikings that were singing with their kind of throat singing style was actually really cool. And like the dance and the fires, like, these guys are scary as fuck, but there's a culture here. And I thought it was interesting to explore that, because I think usually in the world of Vikings, we just know it as like the blood, the raiding, the drinking. But like, there is a religion, there is a culture and a society of sorts here. So it was interesting to get to explore that in a more meaningful way than just a hack and slash action movie.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, some of the things I like about it, I really do like that scene, like the singing and dancing, even though it's in like another language, you kind of get the gist of what they're talking about. Like, and just some of the rituals and like the celebrations. I really enjoyed all that. I like that it's, like I said before, straightforward, and like it is. I mean, it's like it's a tale, it's a mythological tale, and like there's a prophecy and it gets executed, and there's only a minor twist that I think adds a cool layer to the story, but doesn't end up changing anything in the prophecy. The prophecy is laid out, and I appreciated that. I think it's a cool like turning point when he finds out the truth that his mother is not. It was like part of actually the reason why his father got killed, and it's like, okay, now how can he complete his mission? He can't save his mother anymore, but I mean, he saves her by putting her out of her misery. She says, thanks for doing it in the heart. But I don't know. That's maybe my read on it. Maybe that's wrong. But he still saves her from the mistake she's made. But I just like how like he still just goes on with his mission after finding that out. I just enjoy it. And my tearjerker moment is when he leaves, when he's on the boat, and they split up. He decides to go back. I think that's a great moment. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of things about it, and it's an action movie, so like it's just talking about kind of these scenes, like some of these scenes, like in the first raid, when like I just think that raid is so much fun, and he catches that spear and he throws it back, and then like whatever that is, Quidditch game or whatever they're doing, like I think that was pretty cool. And then like that's the Mountain Knight from Game of Thrones, and then he's like gonna kill the brother, and he stops him. I love that. And then I know I'm going through it quickly, but and then the battle on the hill where he's fighting with the sheath sword, I think that's really great because he can't take it out during the light. And the final fire battle, I think, is awesome too.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
thought it was incredible. And I mentioned like the aesthetics of obviously looks great in this, but like on a more practical level, I really liked how believably strong he looked in the movie. Like the
yeah,
scene where he's swimming breaststroke to get to the boat, like fully clothed when he hops on and pretends to be a slave. Like you're like, God, this guy looks like he is like just perfectly evolved for this environment. Like just looks so ready to jump into ice cold water, swim like 500 meters. And yeah, anyway, so I love that aspect of it. I think they did a really like believable job with it. I think one of the really interesting parts of the story too, though, is, you know, so many times stories really just depend, like the heroes and villains of them just depends on whose point of view you see first. And so in this movie, Amleth sees his father get slain after his father has made him, while they're high, take a vow that he would avenge him.
yeah,
And so from that point on, we understand this revenge story and his uncle's evil and all these things. But if you take a step back, and I still think the uncle is evil for a lot of other reasons, but if you take a step back, you know, Ethan Hawke as the king, you know, the first thing he does when he gets home, his wife wants his embrace. He says no, he's not interested, which is okay. Like at the time we give it a pass, but it's actually kind of interesting. You know, once you know the context, it's like, oh, okay. Clearly he's a bit cold to her.
he wants more than an embrace. He's like, nah, I'm tired, not tonight. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it seems like that's what she wanted, and he doesn't want it.
No, but
He's
she's like,
no, I have to talk to my son right now. That's what I need to
no,
do.
but even later, she's like, let's go to bed. He's like, I'm tired. You remember that?
It's a long day.
Yeah.
No, but so I mean, but like seriously, that, and then what does he say to her? He's like, I need to die in combat, which I can respect
Right.
to a degree is part of their culture. Maybe that's something that is required to go to Valhalla. But on a practical level, as a king, what that ultimately means is I'm going to go commit more warfare and murder because I think that I need to do that to go to heaven, which is like pretty fucking insane. If you I mean, it's kind of horrible in a way, right?
Yeah.
And we just take it for granted because of their culture and how it's presented. And he's noble and he loves his son, so he must be a good guy. But then later on, we also find out that like Fjolnir actually knew the fact that Nicole Kidman was, you know, taken as a forced sex slave, and he didn't care because he loved her, and they had a kid together, and they love the kid, and they love each other, and like the Nicole Kidman says to Amaleth at the end, like, you have your father's trait for simplicity as like a slight, like it's a dig at him, because he still looks at this world through this very myopic lens of vengeance and what do the gods want and blood. And it doesn't even let in the conversation of maybe your father was a bad person and maybe I found love and maybe I understandably resented you because you were a child of rape. Like there's a lot of interesting bits to that as well, which I think then it gets a little bit more convoluted when it's like, well, I mean, God himself came down in the form of Bjork to tell me that I need to continue this oath that I made. And then I see Willem Dafoe like through the man witch. So anyway, it's interesting, but I do love that there's both of those elements at play, both very much like the spiritual, like epic going on with those visions, while at the same time being like a more nuanced, like there is actual depth to these people. And Fjolnir is never really shown to be too, actually, I mean, he is evil towards Anya Taylor-Joy, like he's looking to sexually assault her, but you know, he's a loving father. He seems like he's more caring of a husband than his brother ever was. So I guess in the world of Vikings, it's all relative who's more or less evil.
Yeah. I mean, make me think about like, yeah, it's like if you think about the tree and like the fate and like the what's laid out before you, like who's gonna achieve in their destiny, right? And like people are at like in conflict with each other, like maybe Fjornir's son would have gone on to be a great king, and it was his Fjornir's destiny to kill Alex Skarsgård, and so that can happen, but it's like who's gonna execute on their plan better, and and Skarsgård, he does it. He doesn't waver. He doesn't question when he's faced with like, oh well, was my father actually the bad one, and should I just walk away and take my my wife, and now, and we'll live a happy life and we'll have a kid, whatever. He's like, no, no, no. The destiny that was laid out for me by, the fates, the witches, is that I need to kill him, because if I don't kill him, my children will never be safe, and my bloodline, my family tree is what needs to move on. So I think that's pretty cool. I just really like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it brings, because I was thinking about this when I was watching, and I was like, is this the most evil protagonist in a movie I've watched?
Yeah.
Like, ever? I mean, and because he's a slaver, and like not even just the middleman, which is also horrible, but he's the one that's scaling the wall, butchering men, and then helping to corral children into a house that they burn down.
Yeah.
Like, if that's the starting point for this guy, it's obviously not great, but his uncle having an estate with slaves on it is, I mean, honestly, it's not as bad as burning like a house full of children down. Like,
Yeah.
but that's the spectrum that's displayed here. Both are abhorrent. And but I guess to Amleth's point, like you were just mentioning, is like he has had, as far as he knows, God come down to tell him he has to do this thing. So at that point, it's like, okay, I guess I don't know
Yeah.
what's good or evil in this world anymore, but it makes it seem a little bit more arbitrary than usual.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think holds us back from being better?
I think Anya Taylor-Joy is like fine in this movie, but I don't know that I don't think it's her fault necessarily, or Skarsgård's fault, but I just feel like they're missing either a chemistry between them or one more scene to make me feel like they love each other. And maybe that's intentional in a sense, because these are brutal people, and so I think it would make sense that their love would look different in a way too. Like, they're not lovey-dovey. That's not how they communicate. It's more of like a point of necessity, and also if there's some compatibility, that's enough. But I wish there was a little bit more chemistry between them. I think that would have been good.
Yeah, I guess because it's like ultimately not about them, even though it should. Yeah, it's tough to not like recognize that, but it's like ultimately about him, right? And he's now like planted his seed, and he's like off on his
Well,
mission,
literally.
literally.
But
And I actually think between them, the weak point I think is him. I think she's really good. I think he is a little bit weak, just with the accent and like the believability. I think he's really believable as like a powerful fighter. Like, you really believe it when he's just taking on the whole tribe by himself. But in some of those more intimate scenes, I think he can be a little weak.
I agree. But I will say, to push back on, the movie is about him, and I agree. But then if you're supposed to have a moment that's like has this emotional weight to it of him jumping off the boat, it doesn't have that weight if I don't believe in them as a couple, or as like loving each other, or there being a future here.
No,
So I
I
feel
think
like there has to be more.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's funny because I had that emotional feeling about it, forgetting that there's no chance he's going to stay, because his path has been laid out. He's always going to go back. He's always going to kill his uncle and die doing it. It's like but you still get some emotion. But yeah, it's interesting.
So I will say, overall, I really enjoyed this movie, and probably the biggest part of it is I love like I mentioned it before, but the rituals, and like striving as always to have that cultural and like historic cultural element of it. But I do think the weakness of it is really, compared to the other two, it's like I just feel like there is a little bit less to talk about. I think it's the swing isn't as big in some ways, as much as it is in scale larger. I feel like in terms of like the relationships, like the first two movies, The Witch is all about this family. It's about the dynamics between them. The second movie is about these men, the relationships with themselves and with each other, and maybe a little bit of a relationship of like the power dynamic. But this movie, I mean, Amleth is just such a simple character in a lot of ways. Like, I don't feel like there's a lot of turmoil within him when he ultimately jumps off that boat. And I think that's fine. I think it's believable. I think he's just like a one-track mind sort of guy. But I think, for me to really, really love a movie, I just like having that extra bit of depth to sort of, if not like directly relate with the main character, I want to be able to empathize with them. And I don't necessarily feel that way about this movie with really anyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that moment on the boat, it's like him realizing that his mission is not complete when he finds out, okay, like you have a kid coming, and he's like, but they're never gonna be safe unless I do this mission. Like he's like constantly getting reminded that like he has to do that. And I think if he was like a more complex character who like I agree with your points, by the way, that it's tough to root for him. But I think like what Edgar's probably trying to go for is if he was more complex, there'd be more of like a struggle with that. And this movie's about like a man on a mission, and like this is his path, this is his fate, and he's gonna do it, and nothing's gonna sway him. I think that some of the stuff that I didn't like about it is like I don't really have an issue with like the plot points because like we're not dealing in reality here, but like I mean we're leaving him alone, tied up with his special sword, and like they just all leave him like when like at the end. It's like, but it's okay. It's like a myth. It's not supposed to be like straightforward. So like I'm willing to like overlook that. I don't know if straightforward is the right word, but I'm willing to overlook that part. The stuff the one thing that I actually don't like is like I don't get when he's fighting like that undead guy for the sword, like, and then he fights him and then he kills him and then like he looks over and he sees himself like just taking the sword from the undead guy. What is that? I don't.
I thought that was kind of cool. I feel like it was almost like, I mean, I guess it's up for interpretation to a degree, but I felt like it was basically almost like a vision quest. Like he had to like achieve it in his mind. And because he was capable of it, so it was almost.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's kind of how I read it too. Is like that actually didn't happen. He just But I was like, oh no, we're dealing with like a lighthouse thing again. We're like I kind of not trust what I'm seeing, But yeah, but then also I do agree with you that like the characters are harder to connect with, but it's also like I'm just watching it as like an epic, just a action movie, and I think it does pretty good. It's pretty exciting for that in that genre.
I'm trying to think if I have any. Oh, I do just want to say when he jumps off the boat at the end, when he makes the decision, this is a nitpick. It's just a bad jump. It's not what you want is a Jack Sparrow perfect swan dive. And it looks pretty rough.
It was a belly flop.
Yeah, it was a little bit rough. He's not getting a lot of points on that one.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about the Northman before we say a couple things about Nosferatu and close up?
Well, I'll just say the score. I think I give it a 4 out of 5. I think really like from the scene with him leaving on the boat through the end, like it's like perfect. Like I do think that like the final showdown and like the confrontation with his mother and then killing the little kid and him stab, like I think the last 20 minutes are like perfect and just everything I'd want from like an action adventure revenge journey. I think the myth stuff is cool. It's a little hard to follow sometimes. When the first time I saw it, I definitely was having a hard time following it, but then like with like the different witches, and now he's William Dafoe's voice speaking to the other guy, but I'm like, whatever, like I don't really care about that. And when I watched it the second time, I just enjoyed the action. I don't think it's like a 5 out of 5 action movie now. So I think it's like a 4 out of 5 action movie. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I ultimately gave it a 4 as well, just because it's just kind of funny because I was just hyping up, I feel like, the Lighthouse more than I was hyping up the Northman. But ultimately, I just enjoy, like, I found it more entertaining, and I didn't feel like I was having to force myself to, like, enjoy it as much as I did at some points in the Lighthouse. Like, this to me was just, like, really entertaining, a way better version of the blockbuster in my mind than what we typically get. Like, it's just trying to show us a lot more historically and culturally than we would normally ever get. So I really enjoyed it. Thought it was entertaining. It's a 4 for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's fair. I mean, you're rating it within a genre, right? Like Lighthouse, we're not even sure what the genre is, and then this, it's an action movie. So you're saying, yeah, it's a 4 out of 5 action movie. I think it's fair.
All right. So Nosferatu comes out on the 25th, which as of recording this is 9 days away. I have, every time I've gone to a movie theater and there's been a trailer, I've closed my eyes because I know I'm seeing this movie. So I want to go in as raw as possible. I am very fired up about it. I'm ready to get hurt again.
Yeah, I've unfollowed 2 people on Letterboxd who scored it already, and it just made me so mad. It's like, if you're getting these screeners or whatever, like, don't score it. Or just say you watched it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 2 people.
Okay, well, don't even tell me. I don't
I
even
will
want to
not
hear.
tell you anything more. I'm just
Thank
whether
you.
it's good or bad, I'm irritated that I know now what two people think of it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I feel like this is going to be a step back towards the Lighthouse witch style of Eggers, where I think it's going to be a little bit more like less about the violence and more about the dialogue and the relationships at play. But I think it'll still have like the entertainment and like some of the exciting scale that the Northman had. So I'm very bullish on this one.
Oh, I'm excited about it for sure, and I'm trying to watch the other Nosferatu movie ahead of it. I'm curious if it's going to be like a straight retelling, like the Warner Herzog one was, or if it's going to be his own thing. And I think being fans of Eggers, we might appreciate it even more. And I'm excited about the cast, and yeah, looking forward to that.
Awesome. All right. Anything else you want to bring up before we call this one?
No, I think we did it. That was a big undertaking.
Yeah, this was a lot. This was fun. I think after this, maybe we stick to just one movie a pop for a little bit.
Yeah, probably.
Or we just do like all of Harry Potter or
all right, let's
Lawrence
do
of Arabia.
All the films of Martin Scorsese next week. Documentaries.
That would be insane.
Documentaries included, short films.
Interviews.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you as always for listening, for anyone that eventually listens to this. Please. And if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe and leave a comment with any movie you'd like to have us talk about.
All right.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Yep.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.